1 Intro. Most people think Stoics were calm because they controlled their emotions. That's wrong. The truth is, Stoics never tried to control emotions at all. And that single misunderstanding is why so many people today feel exhausted, reactive, and emotionally trapped. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the hidden Stoic rule about emotions that no one talks about, and why it quietly changes everything about how you experience anger, fear, and pain. Before we go further, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers if you want ancient wisdom that actually works in modern life. Now, let's begin. 2. The common misunderstanding. Most people believe the goal is to control emotions, to stay calm, to stay positive, to never feel anger, fear, or sadness for too long. That idea didn't come from Stoicism. It came from modern culture's obsession with performance, always composed, always productive, always fine. But here's the problem. The harder you try to control an emotion, the more attention you give it. And attention is fuel. When you suppress anger, it doesn't disappear. It waits. When you force positivity, fear doesn't leave. It hides. The Stoics noticed something most people miss. Emotions are not commands. They are signals. Raw impressions that appear before reason has a chance to speak. The mistake isn't feeling the emotion. The mistake is immediately believing the story it tells you. Anger says, "You've been wronged." Fear says, "You're not safe." Sadness says, "Something is missing." Modern thinking tells you to fight those voices. Stoicism teaches you to pause and question them instead. Because the moment you stop treating emotions like enemies, they stop acting like dictators. 3. Stoic context. To understand how the Stoics viewed emotions, you have to forget the image of emotionless philosophers. Marcus Aurelius wasn't calm because he felt less. He was calm because he understood what emotions actually were. The Stoics believed emotions begin as impressions, automatic reactions that rise before thought. A harsh word is spoken. Your chest tightens. Your mind rushes to explain what just happened. That first reaction was never the problem. Even Epictetus admitted you cannot stop an impression from appearing. What you can stop is giving it authority. Marcus wrote about this constantly. He reminded himself that an emotion is not a verdict. It is an invitation to examine. Anger arrives, but it doesn't prove injustice. Fear appears, but it doesn't prove danger. Sadness lingers, but it doesn't prove loss is unbearable. The Stoic discipline was not emotional control, it was emotional clarification. They slowed the moment down. They separated what happened from the meaning assigned to it. This is why Stoicism feels uncomfortable to modern minds. It doesn't numb pain, it asks you to sit with it long enough to see it clearly. The Stoics trusted reason not to erase emotion, but to put it back in proportion. Once an emotion was seen clearly, it naturally lost its grip, not because it was fought, but because it was understood. 4. The hidden rule. Here's the hidden rule the Stoics lived by. And it's the part no one wants to hear. You don't control emotions. You control consent. An emotion shows up like a knock at the door. It's fast, it's loud, it feels convincing. But the Stoics believe the knock is not the decision. The decision is what happens next, when your mind either says, yes, or not yet. This is why Marcus Aurelius kept writing reminders to himself. Because the real danger isn't anger. It's the story anger pushes into your head. They disrespected me. This shouldn't be happening. I have to make them feel it. The Stoic move is subtle, almost invisible. You catch the story before it becomes identity. You separate the feeling from the verdict. Anger can be present, without becoming cruelty. Fear can be present, without becoming surrender. Sadness can be present, without becoming hopelessness. In Stoic terms, your emotion is an impression, raw data. Your judgment is the interpretation. And your suffering often comes not from the data, but from the interpretation you approve without questioning. That's the hidden rule. Feel everything, but don't automatically believe everything you feel. When you stop giving instant consent to every emotion's narrative, your inner life becomes quieter, clearer, and strangely powerful. Not because you became numb, but because you became free. 5 modern life example. Ethan reads the message twice. Short, cold, no explanation. His chest tightens before his mind catches up. The emotion arrives instantly, anger mixed with fear. And just as fast, the story forms. She doesn't respect me. I'm being pushed aside. This always happens. Lena, on the other side, stares at her phone. She didn't mean to sound distant. But now silence fills the space, and her own emotion rises, a quiet sadness wrapped in guilt. Her story sounds different, but it's just as convincing. I've disappointed him. I'm never enough. I should have said more. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. No shouting. No confrontation. Just 2 people alone with their emotions. And the stories attached to them. This is where most damage is done. Not in the argument itself, but in the moment before it. When emotion is mistaken for truth. The Stoic rule would change this moment entirely. Not by removing emotion, but by slowing the story down. Ethan notices the anger without obeying it. Lena notices the sadness without drowning in it. For a brief moment, neither reacts. And in that pause, something subtle happens. The emotion stays, but its authority weakens. Anger becomes information, not a weapon. Sadness becomes a signal, not a sentence. Nothing outside has changed, but inside, everything has. 6 Stoic practice. So what do you do in real time, when the emotion hits and the story starts running? The Stoics had a practice that looks simple, but it's brutally effective. Step 1. Name the emotion. Not dramatically, not as an identity. Just a label. Anger, fear, shame, sadness. The moment you name it, you create distance. You stop being the emotion and start observing it. Step 2. Separate facts from interpretation. Ask, what happened, literally? Not what it means, not what it implies. Just the raw facts. A message was short, a tone sounded sharp, a plan changed. That's it. Everything else is a story. Step 3. Challenge the first story. The first story is almost always the loudest and the least accurate. Ask, what else could this mean? Am I assuming disrespect? Am I assuming rejection? Am I assuming danger? Step 4. Choose the smallest wise action. Not the perfect action, the wise one you can do right now. Breathe once. Wait 10 seconds. Ask one clarifying question. Walk away for 2 minutes. This is the Stoic pause. Not suppression, not denial. A deliberate gap between impression and consent. And when you repeat that gap, daily, something changes. You still feel everything, but you stop being pushed around by what you feel. That's how the Stoics built emotional strength. Not by controlling emotion, but by controlling the moment they agreed with it. 7 Closing and identity shift. If there's one shift Stoicism asks you to make, it's this. Stop asking how to control emotions. Start asking who you become when emotions appear. The Stoics never promised a life without anger, fear, or sadness. They promised something harder, and far more valuable. A life where emotions don't decide who you are. When you pause instead of reacting. When you question instead of obey. You quietly move from being ruled to being responsible. That's the real Stoic identity. Not cold, not distant, but grounded. You still feel deeply. You just don't let feelings write your character for you. Over time, This changes how people experience you. Your calm isn't silence, it's clarity. Your restraint isn't weakness, it's strength. And your presence begins to feel steady, even under pressure. This is what emotional freedom actually looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the absence of emotional domination. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who reacts too fast and regrets it later. Leave a comment below. What emotion challenges you the most right now? And if you found value here, like this video. It helps this message reach the people who need it most. Most importantly, subscribe to Legacy of Thinkers for timeless Stoic wisdom that helps you live with clarity, strength, and calm in a chaotic modern world.